So Spiritforged is in full swing, and we are now taking a look at the meta as it gets ever more defined. We've had some really exciting tournaments that have taken place, as well as the percentage results of those topping in the Spiritforged meta. So let's go ahead and take a look at that meta and see what these deck lists are able to do. So this is something that's always exciting to go about finding out, is when we go into this, what's going to be the top new decks, what kind of cool combinations are we finding, and more importantly, is there kind of a new surprise twist to a deck list that maybe we haven't considered, especially with now over 200 new cards being added in. There's a lot of possibilities at that point, and it's really interesting too because you only get 40 cards. That's it, plain and simple. And one of them is already going to be the champion that you have chosen. And that can be a big difference maker in how your whole deck will shape out. And so you have a lot of decision making to go about this. And it seems like in some ways Annie necessarily hasn't really found its magic that she originally had in set one, which is going to be interesting to see as well. Because what are we going to be able to do with this? Well, Annie almost feels like, and I've been saying this on my X account, that Annie almost feels better as a set one build currently than how she feels in set two. And it's interesting because it's like, well, why is that? And yeah, that's the thing. Annie is just such a tight-knit deck to where every top deck that you are able to go ahead and find is very valuable. You could get the Fight or Flights, the Flashes, the Kaisa, the Dariuses. All of those are very much at the top and can be applied to any number of circumstances that you might need for your current situation, which is why Annie is such a scary deck to contend against. Now you're looking at it and it's like, well, are we going a little bit too forward on the deck list with set two, adding cards that are kind of slowing it down, bogging it up, and really making it difficult for Annie to shine? I went against two Annies in the Runes and Rift tournament over the weekend, and it was a little bit of it wasn't a struggle. I don't want to say cakewalk. I almost did, but I don't want to necessarily say cakewalk, but it just felt like Annie didn't have that impact that it had in Origins. That's scary because it also felt like that this Annie deck relied more on going first than what we initially thought that Origins Annie necessarily had to weigh in on. And so, again, we're going to see, I really think that for Annie to at least succeed, you really need to go ahead and take that step back. Really, what it might just be is adding 2 hard bargains, and that is probably it. That's all. I'm serious there. That might very well be the only change that you need to be able to make so that Annie can still have that impact. We'll see, but that's what it feels like in my own opinion. And I mean, we go ahead and we take a look at everything here on the city challenges. So for those of you who don't know, the city challenges are challenges in China that are able to have any number of competitors. Most of them have between 85 and 130, 125 competitors. And so we are going to go ahead and take a look at these decks that have been able to make it into the top 8. Now, I want to watch over this real quick because it's important to see how everything shaped up. First off, Draven has been the highest showing and also one of the best performing here. And he is, of course, that new toy that everyone is trying to fixate towards and build around. And the legend ability of being able to go ahead and draw a card every single combat that you are able to win is such a great ability. Go ahead and move into a battlefield and then fight or flight them out. That's one combat. Go ahead and have them retreat out with Reaver's Row to go back to base. That's a one combat. Go ahead and just beat them in a showdown. One combat. There are so many ways to go about that, and it is proving why so many people are flocking over to Draven as a whole. But more importantly, the the records are showing for themselves. Draven has been able to go ahead and in all the city challenges from last week, he was able to go ahead and make it into, 24 decks or about 30% of the field in that top 8. And again, I do want to really say thank you so much for Runes and Rift to making these graphics. Great job there. You can find them on X and YouTube alike. Give them a follow. That is the tournament that I also entered over the weekend. So always be sure to go ahead and follow them. Really great place to see some solid content, gameplay, and tournaments. So on top of that too, Kai'Sa seems to be one that still needs to have a little bit of discovery of herself. This meta is a lot different, and Kai'Sa is one of the only decks here that can maintain good removal while still being able to maintain the board presence because of her legend ability of being able to cover the power cost of a spell once per turn. That's really good. And it allows you to be able to run things like Falling Stars, Singularities, Acathian Rains, whatever else it might be, to go ahead and combat against your opponents and be able to do so. The rest of the decks here, outside of like yellow with Victor and Azir, don't necessarily have that direct removal. Yes, I mean, you could argue that Lux does, but she's one deck out of the whole top 8, so we won't talk about that. But outside of that, there isn't necessarily a whole ton of spell removal. There's a lot of buffing up with green. There's a lot of buffing up with orange even. And being able to then go ahead and use Punch First and cards like that to be able to give you a huge advantage against your opponent in showdowns. But that's it. And then you also have things like Rebuke, Fight or Flight, or things like that, but they don't necessarily directly remove with spell power by dealing 3 damage, 6 damage, or whatever else it might be. And so Kai'Sa's the only one so far that is able to do that. And also on top of that, this is a very interesting Draven counter. The fact that you can go ahead and then, use your Acathian Rains to take out a Draven is something very powerful. And a lot of their units are 1 or 2 mites outside of, maybe a Kai'Sa, a Darius, or a Draven. So you can take out a Draven with using 4 targets of Acathian Rain, and then on the final 2, you can clear out 2 other units potentially. And that already can be a lot to slow down Draven so that you are able to go ahead and, utilize your ability to win combats. Again, though, it feels like that Kai'Sa has kind of gone way too into the set 2 cards and needs to take that step back and maintain the card draw, maintain the retreats, the ramp, and the aggression so that you can continue to take it back against the top decks. Next has been really interesting too. I love the Master Yi ideas here. 7 decks in the top 8, and that is going to be about 8%, 9% of the field all in all. And it is a really interesting one. I still think that we need to figure out what Master Yi is able to do in this meta, where you need to go with certain things. It's really interesting because Punch First seems to be the, new eye-catching card in a lot of orange decks. That being said, that is really slowing down Master Yi's ramp ability, and so you're not seeing cards like Deadbloom Predator being necessarily run. Is that a mistake? It seems like it very well might be, because that is one of the most powerful cards in the deck. But at the same time, it just seems like there's a lot more power cost in the Master Yi deck now without a lot of gold generation and without running seals. So because of that, you are going to be a lot lower to the ground with your rune count, and you very well might not be able to, stay into that high rune count to get out your Master Yi, to get out your Deadbloom Predator, to be able to impact and hold down the battlefields. It's also really relying on the Trinity Force to be a part of the deck with that, because you are able to then go ahead and play out a 2-mite unit, and then the following turn you play a Trinity Force, and you can potentially start locking down and getting double the points each turn for the foreseeable future until they're able to deal with that gear. And so that's something that is really scary here, but yet it seems like Yi just isn't quite there again and is maybe struggling at making as big of an impact in this meta as we could see. Now, Blade Dancer is a really interesting one with Aurelia. We have Ezreal, who is still, finding some good finishes there. We had Fiora that had a really good ending over the weekend with Sivir. Really good options there. I mean, and this is the interesting part. Sivir hasn't even made it in the city challenges, but went ahead and won the Runes and Rift tournament. And I mean, her ability is insane as a legend. Being able to go ahead and anytime that you recycle a rune or you pay a power cost, you tap your legend and you are able to create a gold. Then anytime a unit dies on the other side of the battlefield, well, then you just ready the legend. So if you sacrifice any other runes for that matter, then you can go ahead and make another gold and you go back and forth. You see how it works. Crazy. And you can just get unlimited gold generation essentially and really mitigate your power costs so that you are able to continue to get more and more runes going for you so that you can really impact the board. Before we start taking a look at deck lists, I also want to say that Lucian might be a little bit underrepresented here. He is a really interesting deck idea, though he does fall pretty heavily to gear destruction. It's almost kind of the same thing with the Azir as well. Now, the big thing that Lucian is able to do is that he can go ahead and use Weapon Master, probably the best out of any decks, even outside of Azir, I would say, just because of the ability to go ahead and get Assault 1 for each equipment that is attached to a unit. So already you're able to pack a punch a little bit better and get a lot of things done. So I'm going to be curious to see what he is going to be able to do. And we have a deck list to look at what his deck looks like and, what all it can do. Now, again, we have some things people worried about maybe MF Aurora, and, rightfully so. It is a deck list that a lot of people have been curious and worried about because, well, there's a lot of gear destruction. So what are you going to do when you finally are able to get out your dazzling Aurora and it immediately gets destroyed? Not much. And so you got to be a little bit careful about that. There's no way to necessarily retrieve the gears after they've already been destroyed. So once it's gone, it's gone. You just need to draw the next one. And so to still see, though, MF Aurora actually having a decent enough showing. It hasn't won anything. If I recall correctly, its best showing was 5th place, but still really cool to be able to see here. Now, next, of course, we are going to also be seeing the top 8 deck distribution of the Runes and Rift tournament. And this is a really interesting diversity here. Now, of course, Sivir was the one to go ahead and take it all. And then Lucian was able to get 3rd with Fiora getting 2nd. And then I won 4th with Draven. Really cool pool to be able to see there. We'll go over all top 8 deck lists in this video, and it is going to be something to consider. Now, Sivir is really interesting because you are going to be able to really do a lot of hand control, and that seems to be the big thing that she is able to do as a legend. You have things like Sabotage, Mind Splitters, and other cards to be able to go ahead and say, hey, I see your hand, I know what you're playing, also, you can't keep that card. And it was a really cool deck list to see. Then Fiora came in and had a lot of gear and movement around, going big. And, I mean, I gotta say, Fiora's signature spell feels so incredibly good. The fact that you can go ahead and counter any spell. And then you're able to then go ahead and say, also, by the way, I'm going to add the might based off of your cost and a spell cost and add it to the might of my unit. Cool. Just a very difficult one to be able to go against. And then Ezreal ended up getting 5th or worse in that case. But still, to be able to get 2 Ezreal decks that were in the top 8, this is a 36-player pool. But again, it is really cool just to see how these decks were able to perform. Now, this is really interesting to see because a lot of it seems fairly odd to the ground. You see that there's 1 Sabotage, 3 Scrap Heaps, 1 Hard Bargain, 1 Ride the Wind, a lot of the one-ofs with spells. Why is that? Well, it's because you are going to be either using them or getting them into the trash so that Fizz can come in and utilize them. The more cards that you get in your trash as well, you'll have Rasha coming in, and there's a lot of things that you are able to do to be able to recycle those spells, to reutilize them so that you can continue to hit the board time and time again with this deck. it can swing hard. Not only that, it's really cool because you can start with Zon Warrens at first, and you have the draw one, discard, or you have discard, draw one. It goes in that order. And that can already add a lot to the discard. Fizz can then utilize all of that as well. Then on top of that, the next turn, then you go with the Mind Skull, or whatever that's battlefield is called. And that will cause you to, anytime that you conquer, you discard 2 cards into your trash. And then, of course, then Fizz can go in and get that right back out and utilize it properly. And so, yeah, you're almost kind of betting on that you are multiplying the amount of cards that you have. You're only running 1 Rebuke. Well, with Fizz, you could be running a lot more. Now, Fizz, when you activate his ability, he covers the cost up to 3 of that spell, and you still have to pay the power cost. But you're already generating a lot of gold, and if you do end up actually using the spell from the trash, you put it back to the bottom of your deck. And so there's a chance, slim chance, that you might even be able to see it again. I mean, you have your stack deck. You have your called shot. You have a lot to be able to get through your decks. You're still running, of course, 3 fighter flights, and units like that, but still, you're really utilizing your spells to be the board control, to give you the hand knowledge, to be able to then know what you need to do to be able to combat against your opponent. And there are some really cool gameplay that Rune and Rifts are going to be uploading this week to show exactly what this deck is able to do. And guys, don't sleep on Sivir. She seems like she is going to be a really fun deck that can really take this meta by storm. Next, of course, we are going to be seeing second place. This is the Fiora that I ended up losing against in the top 4. This wasn't a top 8. They just decided to do a top 4, and rightfully so. I was done playing at the end of the night. I didn't even play for third place. My family had a little bit of a gathering kind of thing, and so I was like, you know what? I just need some time to myself. It had been like an 8-hour day already. It's a lot. And I was okay with 4th. I'm like, cool. I'll give my opponent 3rd. And it was the guy who already beat me. We'll look at his deck next, of course, because he got 3rd. Now, Fiora is a really interesting one because you get the ramp off of the legend ability where anytime something becomes mighty, you can then tap your legend to then channel a rune exhausted. And so, yes, it kind of sucks that it is a once per turn, but that's because making something mighty is so easy in this deck. And so it's really cool to see how all of this is able to be utilized. Also, Yone is a really interesting card because you can go ahead and deal damage to any units in the base. And so you got to be really careful when going against him as a unit because you keep anything in the backfield and it's probably going to get blown up. I do love also the 3 sets. I love the 3 Deadbloom Predators. Akshan is really good because if you recycle 2 runes, then you are going to be able to take over an equipment, which is going to be very powerful there. And this deck just has so much versatility. And then with probably the best signature spell in this meta, I mean, it can be so difficult to overcome. The big thing is, of course, you might be struggling with card draw. And if you start running out of cards, you might really fall behind in that case. And so you got to balance that out. But even Fiora as the champion has such a great ability to where you can go ahead and recycle an order rune and a unit that came in, if they're, a unit that comes in, you can go ahead then and have them be ready so that they can immediately come in accelerated. So it's even a 1 less cost to accelerate it, which is really cool to be able to see. And so really fun deck, really cool to see how this will continue to interact. I love the sets. I love the Fioras, the Akshans, the Kianas. It just feels like a very balanced deck. And the fact that it was able to go in and get second was incredibly powerful. It fell to Sivir mainly due to the fact that Sivir was able to go ahead and, one, just know the entire hand with Sabotage and Mind Splitters and units like that. But more importantly, it was able to also just get the answers with fighter flights and rebuke and things like that to really slow down Fiora here. And so it wouldn't matter necessarily if you did a punch first. You found ways around that because, hey, yeah, you were able to punch first, but yeah, that's back to base. So your punch first actually doesn't mean anything. Things like that can really surprise your opponent and, more importantly, severely slow them down. Now, Tarot King. I went against him in round 2. He was my only loss during the tournament until at least the top 4. And it was a very interesting deck list and one that caught me a little bit by surprise. Now, you do have to kind of rely on the ability to get equipment. If you're able to do so, you're able to do incredibly well. And you're able to punch and retreat, punch and retreat, punch and retreat, and deal with people's board states incredibly well. You're able to go ahead and use First Mate to ready things up. You're able to go ahead and use your signature spell to move in, have it ready so it can immediately move right back out. And then if they play anything, you're like, well, here's challenge. Cool. Here's punch first. Here's blood rush to be able to add potentially up to 4 assault 4. That's already crazy enough too. And so there's a lot of really cool stuff to use in this deck. And I got to tell you, Lucian might be one to really keep an eye on too, because even if you are able to destroy all the weapons that he is able to utilize, it's still going to be a difficult matchup. I also love Rengar. Very cool. You can add Assault 2 when attacking and play it into an attacking battlefield. So if you are going against an Annie and they fight or flight something, well, at reaction speed, you can play Rengar and you're still attacking in with 5. And that can already be something to shut down Annie, because they might only have 2 runes to go ahead and use during their turn. So if they fight or flight something, well, you have a 5 versus maybe a 3 might, and that can be the big difference maker on taking care of their units and continuing to score a lot of points. So great job here. Love this. The side decking is really interesting to see. And I'm going to be curious to watch how well this deck is able to continue to do as we dive deeper into this meta. Now, it's my deck list. This is one that I've been using a lot. It's performed really well. We were able to go ahead and get 4th place out of the 36-player pool, and it felt good. Now, a lot of people are like, why are you only playing 1 stack deck? Well, 1, because you're already drawing a whole ton, but 2, it was supposed to be the audacious Draven, but I hadn't play tested with that yet, and I wasn't comfortable in running that. And so I specifically said, hey, in that case, I'm not going to worry about that. I'll just quickly throw in a stack deck. I made that choice the night before the tournament and ran with it. It really can be anything that you want. 2 Blood Rush felt really good. The 3 signature spell gear was the right call. 2 of the Longsword was really good. Jim Jam, gotta say. The fact that it can go ahead and add ganking is really good. Having 2 of that, really good. The big difference maker in this deck, especially after all the games in the tournament, Hard Bargain. It shuts down stuff. This was one of the biggest reasons why I was able to go ahead and beat Annie, because you would go ahead and attack in, they would use their 2 runes, and they would do Fight or Flight, or they would do Void Seeker. And you're like, yeah, cool. That's really nice that you did Void Seeker. Hard Bargain. You can't pay for it. Cool. Your spell's just countered. And they're like, yeah, that works. And then you'd kill their unit. You'd stop them from drawing a card. They saved 1 rune and then readied up 2 to be able to go ahead and save to be able to fight. But that's it, and that's one of the biggest things that shut down Annie was Hard Bargain. And you got to be very careful about how you go about that. But man, it just felt so incredibly good. And Switcheroo was okay. It was definitely situational. But when you were going against like the Fioras or the Lucians, the units that were able to go ahead and get big, it was like, cool, we switch mites. What are you going to do now? And so it's like, if I had, my treasure hunter, and they had like 9 might. Well, I had 9 might, and then they took their might, and now it's at 1. And it's like, okay, cool, I win. And that's a 1 combat, so Draven would draw, and I would live to fight another day. Starting with Treasure Hunter is also one of probably the most broken things because game 1, I always ran Reaver's Row. And so I would go into Treasure Hunter, into Reaver's Row. They would attack in, immediately move back. I would create another gold, immediately move it back in. They would maybe stay, they maybe would not, but regardless, on the move, I would make another treasure token. If they chose to stay, I probably had the signature spell to add +3 and win the battle. Then I would draw off of that, and then she would retreat, and I'd make another. It just was an insane loop to be able to get things moving. Not only that, Overzealous Fan was such a great card because you aren't able to counter unit abilities necessarily. There are ways, yeah, there's a few cards, but they're not going to necessarily be utilized incredibly well. And so if you're going against green and you're worried about Defy with Fight or Flight, well, cool. Overzealous Fan can still protect you. And you just go ahead and sack that. You push it back. That's a 1 combat. You draw a card. So there's a lot of really fun stuff. Now, one of the biggest debates is Fizz. I love Fizz. I've played him in a lot of games, and especially when you get him at that in-game point, it's really good because then you're like, okay, cool. Here's my Fight or Flight. I can use it again to just push that unit out of base, and then I can attack in and win. Not only that, you can also bait out a lot of responses from your opponent because of Fizz. And so if you go ahead and play Fizz and you rebuke from the trash, cool. If they have a response that they're able to do to stop you from doing so, that's fine. They're going to have to pay the cost of those runes, and usually they'll have 2 or 3 runes maybe left over, and then you're like, okay, now they can't respond. I can do my turn from here on out. And so it's able to give you a lot of really good answers. Some people were wondering, would we switch that with Tide Turner? Would we switch that? Maybe I would put Rengar in instead. Rengar would be a really solid option, or even switching 1 Fizz over to Ezreal and then, doing 2 Rengar with taking out also the stack deck. That, again, could be another really good insurance to help confirm that you are going to be winning these battles. And so, again, it's going to be some play testing. But all in all, it was a really good deck. You're able to hit with a lot of aggression. We did run, of course, with 2 Dravens. That did help because his ability can be so powerful, even just for making gold, let alone going ahead and sacrificing a rune to go ahead and add +2 might to his ability. So that's something that is really interesting to see, especially if you have something like an Overzealous Fan or a Fight or Flight, they attack in, you know that they are going to be able to go in with like a Darius next turn or a Kaisa or whatever else to attack in again. And so you're like, okay, cool, I'll add 2. Then they attack back in with a different unit, and you're like, cool, I'll activate Draven's ability again. I'm up to 8 now. Oh, what's that? I have my 2 runes left up. Oh, by the way, I play my signature spell at reaction speed. Now he's up 3 more than that. So in total, 1, you drew off of the showdown, winning it with the Overzealous or the Fight or Flight. Then you added 4 might. Then you added 3 might. And then you potentially won another combat and drew 2 cards because of both combats. It's stupid. It's really good. Ezreal was also a really good get-out-of-jail-free card. That's the main reason why I would run him. Sometimes you do have just a dead card in hand, something that doesn't fit very well in the beginning. You just need to get rid of it. Cool, let's toss it. There was a couple of times I had Longsword. It didn't fit the situation that I needed. I played Ezreal. I discarded Longsword. I drew 2. That already made a really big difference. So fun deck all in all. It did really well. There are still some changes that I would maybe make, but I am very impressed with what Draven was able to do, and glad that we were able to do so well in the Runes and Rift tournament. Now next is going to be 5th place Ezreal. We are going to kind of speed through after this to go through the final deck list, but this is a really cool one too, and it's finally seeming like it's taking a step in the right direction. Wages of Pain is a really good step. You also have Singularity. Sivir is going to be a really powerful card to be able to accelerate 2,000 tails with that. I didn't actually end up going against an Ezreal my entire tournament, but I have gone against it a lot in the past. And I say this is a step in the right direction because the hardest part was that Ezreal would seem to draw through its entire deck but then still not be able to win the game. And it's like, why can you not win the game if you're able to only have 3 cards left in your deck? What is going on with your deck to where you don't have those kinds of answers? Something's wrong. That's why this one being in 5th place is a really big deal, and a great job at being able to do so. The rebukes, we have the frigid touch, which can also add -2 to up to 2 units if you choose to repeat it. That only costs 4. You can also do a frigid touch and then a gust and be able to put them back into hand because they're under 3 might. That can really slow down your opponent a ton too. Not only that, going on Wages of Pain to deal 3 damage and create a gold is incredibly good. And so I want to playtest this deck a little bit more. I think there would be a few changes that I would make to try to make this fit a little bit better to my playstyles and where I think this meta is. But still, I really love what this deck is able to do. Not only that, one of the coolest things is, of course, Ezreal being able to utilize Called Shot so well, because any optional costs get reduced by either 1 power or 1 rune. So even like Thousand Tail Watcher, you can go ahead and reduce that cost. So you only have to recycle 1 instead of 2, or you only have to pay 1 extra and still recycle 2 power. However you want to do it. Really cool to be able to see. And again, really curious to see what this is going to be able to do in the meta. And I think Ezreal took a step in the right direction. Still think we need to do a little bit more refining, but this is a curious deck list. Next, of course, we got Kai'Sa, and it kind of fell out. It was so close to making the top 4, and then if I remember correctly, it fell to Sivir. Again, that hand control is able to do so much, but I think also the biggest thing is Kai'Sa has taken a step back from the insane card draw that she's been known for having. And I think that's going to be a little bit of an issue here. You aren't running the 2-cost Watchful Sentries to be able to draw a card when they die. You still are running the Stupefies. That's perfectly fine. That's great. You still have the Lecturing Yordle. Cool. But what else do you necessarily have outside of Kai'Sa and those 2 cards? Not a lot. And that was one of the biggest things that I think really made the impact. Not only that, you're not seeing a whole lot of just general board removal. Hextech Ray is a really good card. I love that, but it's not necessarily making that big of an impact because there's a lot of answers around that now. And I still feel like the main deck needs a Cathian Rain. That's going to be something to be able to blow up anything on the board anywhere is huge. And I still don't know how I feel about Piercing Light, especially 1 of. It just doesn't necessarily feel great to me here. And so, again, there are some changes that I would definitely be making here. If I am playing Kai'Sa, I want to be able to use my spell slinging to my advantage. I want to be able to draw as many cards as I can, and then I want to be able to deal as much damage as possible. I would still be running 2 Encathian Rains, Singularities up in the air, still would go with the Time Warp, and then 3 retreats. Always 3 retreats. You need the ramp. It doesn't even matter what unit you end up saving, get the ramp. That's way more powerful than, saving the unit. It is a very powerful card because it is a 1 cost for being able to return a card to your hand and saving it from a battle that it would lose, and then being able to channel a rune. But even with that, you need to be a little bit careful there. But still, such a cool deck. Really fun to see what it was able to do. And the fact that it was able to get 6th place is pretty dang solid. Now, of course, next we have Barfling. He's had some really good showings in the Runes and Rift tournaments. But you got to be a little bit careful about how things go about here. I love that he went with the Rasha theme at the end with 2 of them. Going with 3 scrap heaps. And, you can see the differences here. I don't care for stack deck necessarily because what's it going to do? You're already going to be drawing a lot. It is nice that you are able to look at 3 and then go ahead and pick 1. That's helpful, but not necessarily needed. Get Excited is a really good card too because you can go ahead and discard a card. You're probably going to be discarding the Rasha, and then you can deal 10 damage to a unit because it deals damage to its cost. So that's a big difference there. And all in all, it is able to move really fast, but still, I would much rather 2 Noxus Hopefuls and 3 Kai'Sas. I would rather 3 Fight or Flights. You know, one Ride the Wind is fine. One Switcheroo's okay. But again, I don't necessarily know how I feel about this deck combination in particular. Still, it was able to get 7th place, a really good showing, and going to be curious to see how it continues to do. And then, of course, we have the final Ezreal here that we are going to be looking at. And you can see already the big differences that it has in the deck. Some similarities, definitely. But I'm going to be curious to see what we can continue to do to refine Ezreal as a whole. He's doing a really good job, but he's just not quite there. Needs to get that little bit of consistency. And I think going towards the world of removal here, going into Singularity, maybe even going further into Mind Splitters could be a really nice addition there. But Ezreal is definitely a deck that can be powerful, and I don't think that it is going to be all the way back in like the C tier, what we initially maybe thought Ezreal was going to be at, but could even go into B tier, maybe even low A tier once we find that correct balance. But guys, man, this meta is feeling so cool, and the fact that we have so many legends in this meta is insane. I mean, it's cool because you have a whole theme that your deck gets to be built around with the legend ability and essentially your commander or the champion. That is just so cool to be able to experience, and love that that is able to set up the theme for your entire deck. And so with that, this meta feels much wider than what we initially predicted. And that's awesome, because what I think this is going to shape up with is that it is going to come much more down to pilot skill than the deck itself. And that is something to get excited about with this game. We're going to continue to do meta reports every single Monday as we take a look at all the deck lists and who is performing well and what everything is looking like. But guys, this is Riftbound. This is Spiritforged. It is looking so exciting. Go ahead and let me know what you are thinking about the Spiritforged meta so far. What deck is catching your eye the most, and what are you getting most excited about with set number 2? Go ahead and let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, guys, have a good one.